Hey everyone. This episode of Origins Obscura deals with a true crime case and includes some content that some listeners may find disturbing. These include strong language, mentions of child abuse, and sexual assault of a minor. If these topics are going to upset you, then please give this one a pass. And if anything we discuss bothers you, reach out to somebody that you can trust. Thanks for listening. Fairy tales have a moral, urban legends a warning, and crime has a cause and effect. Join us as we explore the origins obscura of Taken by Bigfoot.
Hey, honey, tell me a story about Bigfoot.
Today we have Taken by Bigfoot, the disappearance of Theresa Ann Bier.
And Bigfoot took her?
This one's a true crime, so...
Oh, then it wasn't Bigfoot because Bigfoot is a gentle creature who would do no harm. Don't be dissing Bigfoot.
I'm not dissing Bigfoot.
Well, who is, so I can take him out?
On June 1st, 1987, 16-year-old Theresa Ann Bier skipped school and went on a Bigfoot hunt in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California and never returned. According to the Bigfoot enthusiast who went into the woods with her, she was kidnapped by Bigfoot and carried off into the wilderness, never to be seen again.
I call bullshit right there.
Shirley and David Bier married young. Shirley got pregnant shortly after their vows were said and right before David was drafted to fight in Vietnam. On April 16, 1971, Shirley gave birth to twin daughters, Vicky and Theresa Ann. Theresa was the younger of the pair, a bubbly little girl with hazel eyes and dark brown hair. Unfortunately, life wasn't easy for the Bier girls while David was away at war. Shirley suffered from mental illness and found her new responsibilities as a mother of two energetic children overwhelming. Most of the time, she would leave the girls at David's mom house in order to escape the pressure of being a mom. After his tour of duty, David returned home and the family was reunited, but it didn't last long. In 1974, when Theresa was just 3 years old, she was rushed to the hospital. Upon examination, doctors found multiple broken ribs and a severely fractured leg. Social services were called due to the severity of the injuries, and when questioned, Shirley admitted that she had taken Theresa's leg and twisted it against a crib slat until it broke.
I don't even know where to start with that one.
Right?
But poor kids.
Yeah. This one has a lot of awful in it.
This is going to be a rough ride, huh?
A little bit, yeah.
Should we have put a disclaimer on the front end or just put it in there now?
I don't know. Let's run through it. And if it needs a disclaimer, we can always throw it in at the beginning.
Okay.
Because it's rough, but it's also not. I mean, you'll see.
Okay. Just me jumping out my lane again.
Yeah, there's always you'll see.
Yeah, and there's always me trying to guess. So this will be a running theme when you're listening to these things is Anna's going to talk, and I'm going to guess. I'll guess right. I'll guess wrong, but I will still guess. And it's hey, stay in your lane.
The girls were removed from the home and placed into foster care. They were eventually placed in the home of a family who knew the girls from church, and they stayed with them for some time. David and Shirley divorced after their daughters were taken from them, because, yes. And David eventually remarried a woman named Margie Richmond. Once he had established what he believed to be a stable home for the girls, he petitioned the courts to return custody of his children to him, and was soon granted. So, Dad, at least in appearances here, is trying, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Hoping to put their old life behind them, David moved his little family to Southern California. Their newfound happiness didn't last long, if it ever actually existed. Because apparently David had a type, and it wasn't long before Margie also started abusing the girls.
Oh, boy.
It's reported that she would lock the girls into small spaces, deny them food until they were extremely undernourished, and it wasn't enough to just starve them. She would also eat in front of them, taunting them while forcing them to go hungry.
So, Parent of the Year award.
Yeah, so she wasn't as much, I guess, into the physical violence as their biological mother was, but definitely like neglect, mental torture. She was a peach, apparently. Theresa ran away from home and fled to her grandmother's home in Fresno, California. David tried to get her to come home, but she adamantly refused, and he eventually just lost interest in the fight.
Okay, so we have a Mother of the Year, a Stepmother of the Year, and now we have a Father of the Year.
Because at this point in all of my research, he is still with the woman who was mentally tormenting Theresa and Vicky too. I'm not sure where Vicky lands in all of this, but yeah, and of course she's not going to go home back to her abuser, like, unless forced. So yeah, so she was with her grandma, but her grandma was old, and I guess there were some problems there because eventually Theresa ended up in the home of Margie's ex-husband. Now, Margie was the stepmom, the evil stepmom, yeah.
The evil stepmother's ex-husband.
Ex-husband, who also was Shirley's half-brother. So, bio-mom's half-brother.
Oh, my.
Right? When I actually dug up this little bit of a family tree folded in on itself in my research, I had to like read it like 4 times to figure out exactly what was going on here because, yeah.
I think when you do the video for this one, that'll be up on YouTube, you need to have a slide that's a diagram of that because, you know, that's a country song right there.
So yeah, eventually Theresa ended up in the home of Margie's ex-husband and Shirley's half-brother, John Richmond, also known as Blind Johnny, because he actually showed an interest in raising his teenage niece, and so he was granted custody. How he got custody, I cannot even fathom, because if the abuse suffered by this poor girl up to this point was bad, it gets bad from here. And this is probably where we actually need the trigger warning. So 42-year-old Blind Johnny claimed he lost his eyesight playing Russian roulette. He lived with his 2 sons, a prostitute, and his 17-year-old girlfriend. 42-year-old Blind Johnny lives with his 17-year-old girlfriend. Yes.
And we're in California.
And we're in California in the 80s.
What cult are they involved in?
None that's mentioned in anything that I saw.
That's probably a different story entirely.
Also, courts gave this man custody of a 15-year-old girl. Teresa's 15 years old at this point. Mm-hmm. He is living with his 17-year-old girlfriend. So I don't know if that wasn't disclosed or discovered or the courts didn't care.
I wouldn't have a clue, but none of it makes sense. This is the late 80s, you said?
Let's see, this would have been 85. So very mid 80s.
Okay, so you know how old I was in 1985?
Yes, because I know how old I was in 1985 and I know how old you are.
So as someone who was around that age, if one of my friends at the age of 15 was going to live with her 42-year-old I don't even want to say semi-incestuous. It's just an incestuous relationship, that whole family group right there. And his 17-year-old girlfriend and a hooker, I would have questions.
You're not supposed to say the H word. Sex worker.
I'm sorry.
It's possible that this didn't actually go through the courts, that it was just like a handshake agreement between him and her father. But, you know, as a parent, I would have been like, what? No. But also it kind of sounds like her father had checked out.
Yeah, he probably didn't care, and maybe he didn't know.
It feels like none of the people who were supposed to care about this child did.
Not even a little bit.
Right. Unfortunately, Teresa's life with her uncle was predictably not an improvement from her previous living situations. While in his custody, she often missed school so she could babysit Blind Johnny's kids, or just because he didn't feel like taking her to school. As a result, she did poorly in her classes, and teachers labeled her a slow learner and immature. More horrifyingly, it's been reported, but never confirmed, that Blind Johnny and his friends sexually abused Theresa while she was living with him.
That would not be a surprise.
Because of course he was living with he was dating a 17-year-old at that time. Of course he was going to abuse the 15-year-old in his care. That's not even a friggin' question.
Yes. His 15-year-old, in some way, shape, niece.
Right.
Okay.
There's so much about this story that is it's just what the actual fuck, because up till this point we've done pretty light stories. This one caught my attention just because of the cryptid in the story, but reading it, it's horrifying. It's really horrifying. And I told you when I was researching it that it made me so angry.
Yeah.
And while there are some lighthearted stuff in here, it's mostly in reaction to what the actual fuck.
Mm-hmm. So mid-'80s, what we don't have here is a different strokes, facts of life, adoption kind of situation. We have a girl who at the outset has been abused for her entire life, and it continued on through her mid to late teens.
Mm-hmm. Yep, her entire life. During the last week of May in 1987, Theresa told her friends that she had met a guy and that she was planning to skip school so that they could take a trip to the mountains to hunt for Bigfoot. The guy she was planning the trip with was Russell Shelton Welch, also known as Skip. Welch was a 43-year-old neighbor of Blind Johnny.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so the guy was another old man. I mean, not old, but way too old to be hanging with a 15-year-old. He said he was a house painter, but the truth was he mostly lived off of disability checks. His wife Shannon had died a couple years earlier from a meth overdose, and his grief only caused Welch to sink even deeper into his own drug addiction. He was known to be talkative and a colorful storyteller. Most of his fantastical stories revolved around his obsession with Bigfoot, a cryptid he claimed to have seen many times. On the morning of June 1st, Welch dropped by Blind Johnny's house as the two were friendly with one another, and he noticed Theresa getting ready for school. He offered to drive her there so that Blind Johnny wouldn't have to go out of his way, but of course this was all a pretense, and Theresa never arrived at school that morning. Instead, the pair headed into the Sierra Nevadas to begin their hunt for Bigfoot. On the way out of town, Welch had problems with his 1976 Chevrolet Monte Carlo and stopped at his daughter Chandra's house to deal with the issue. While stopped there, Welch's son also saw the pair before they restarted their journey and headed off into the mountains. Later that morning, Blind Johnny received a phone call from Theresa's school to let him know that she had never made it in that morning. You're going to love this bit. Not wanting to deal with it, he told them that Theresa was homesick.
Wow.
Right? He doesn't know where Theresa is. He gets a call from school, or he thinks that she's at school. He gets a call from school. They're like, hey, she never showed up, and he doesn't want to deal with it.
Well, he doesn't want anybody to know that his 15-year-old ward is out somewhere with a 40-something-year-old. Where was DFS?
Right? As the day wore on, however, her absence started to bother him.
Well, probably because she didn't have anybody to watch his kids.
Little niggly. Yeah, that's probably actually it. So he began to call around to see if anyone had seen or heard from Theresa. No one he knew where the girl was, but he started to learn concerning things about Russell Skip Welch. People told him that Welch was not to be trusted and that he was known to offer young girls drugs to try and have sex with them. Finally concerned about his niece, or I don't know, maybe not wanting another man to horn in on his action is what it kind of feels like. Like, hey, that's my property.
Yeah.
But I just putting thoughts into somebody else's head there because I'm disgusted. Blind Johnny calls the police that evening.
So at this point, she's been gone
All
12
day.
hours.
Yeah, all day. Yep. Police begin an immediate search and start questioning Welch's family and friends. His daughter Chandra told the police that she had seen Theresa with Welch that morning and also mentioned that the previous summer, Welch had tried to lure another girl, Michelle Ryan, up into the mountains with him. But Chandra had warned her not to go. When police spoke to 17-year-old Michelle, she confirmed that Chandra had warned her off, but that she had taken 2 friends with her instead and that she had made it home safe. So his daughter knows this guy's a problem. He shows up at her house with a child. She had warned off another girl previously, but didn't wave off this one.
That's not making any sense. But what you do in the moment, I don't know. Maybe she tried to warn her off, but the girl was stuck in such a pattern of abuse. She was happy for the attention.
She never said that she had tried to talk to Theresa, though, and tell her not to go, or that she had tried to stop her dad. So, I don't know. 4 days later, on June 25th, a police cruiser spotted Welch's Monte Carlo by a trailer park in North Fork, a town in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas near Shut-Eye Peak. The officer did not stop to investigate, but recorded the sighting. It was later discovered that Welch had a friend living in the area, Dorothy Davis. Dorothy told police that when he visited, he was very upset. Welch told her that a young girl had been kidnapped by a satanic group and was being held captive in the mountains. Dorothy dismissed his claims because she believed he was high and delusional at the time. Okay, so 1, the officer saw his car. They knew that they were looking for this car. I don't know why he didn't stop.
It was time for a donut.
He recorded the event. He recorded that he saw the vehicle. Why would you not stop and investigate the vehicle? Investigate the surroundings. You know that this vehicle, that this man is wanted in connection with the disappearance of a 15-year-old girl. Or was she 16? She might have been 16 at the time.
Regardless of 15 or 16 or 18 or 25.
Yeah. He's wanted in the disappearance of a human being. But he doesn't stop. He's probably close to quitting time or something. I don't know. But that infuriates me. Like, why would you not stop? Why would you not investigate it? They could have picked him up at that time. I guess he went back into the mountains after seeing Dorothy, or I don't know. But also, why Satanists again? It's like in the 80s, that was such a go-to.
Well, it's easy to blame the Satanists.
It's everything. It's Satan. On June 11th, 10 days after Theresa's disappearance and 6 days after the officer had spotted his vehicle, Welch was located at his mother's house in Fresno and arrested on an outstanding DUI warrant. When police questioned him, he spoke very seriously about Bigfoot and said that there was a large community of them living up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. They stayed hidden because of their superhuman intelligence and lived in underground caves. Skip also claimed that he'd had contact with them many, many times. So first he says that a girl had been kidnapped. He didn't name Theresa, but he said a girl, so that must have been who he was referencing when he was at his friend's house. And now that he's in police custody, he's talking about this group of Bigfoot. Or if there's multiple, are they big feet? Sasquatchi? What is is it a murder of Bigfoots?
Gaggle.
A herd, a gaggle.
A gaggle. It is a gaggle of Bigfoots.
But yeah,
we all know, I don't care what this guy says, Bigfoot is a solitary creature.
Yeah, because he's saying that there's a group, like there's a community, there's a society of
Bigfoot.
Living in the mountains. I hate this story so much, but you need to laugh about something. And they have superhuman intelligence. So they're way smarter than us. But yet out there grabbing 15, 16-year-old girls.
You know, the story has been rough enough where I am not even going to make a joke there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so dude says to the cops now that the girl was taken by a group of Bigfoots.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, at this point, he's saying that there are
Okay.
Bigfoot up there in the mountains that stay hidden because they're super smart and can avoid us, and that they live underground, and that he's like BFFs with the big feet. I need a plural because Bigfoot sounds so wrong. He can't just put an S on the end of Bigfoot.
Big feets.
That's what I want to call him, big feet.
Let's see.
Are you Googling what the plural of Bigfoot is?
Yes. Bigfoot, plural. And it is going to give me, it can be either Bigfoots or big feet, though Bigfoots is more common.
Yeah, that just it doesn't roll off the tongue. Doesn't feel right.
The Inuit use Bigfoot as singular and plural.
Yeah, I suppose.
So it is a gaggle of Bigfoot.
His story about Theresa was just as strange, and it changed several times. First, he claimed to have dropped her off at school, but when pressed, he finally admitted that he had gone into the mountains with her. He then claimed that she had run off into the woods with another young woman, but quickly changed that to a group of other campers. Finally, he said that Theresa had gotten excited when they spotted a Bigfoot and had run off after the creature. He searched for her but couldn't find her, and he was convinced that Bigfoot had taken her away to live with them.
If he's friends with the Bigfoot, how did he not know where to find her?
Mm-hmm.
If she had seen a Bigfoot and was excited and ran off, why didn't he say, oh, hold on and I'll introduce you? They could have all had some tea.
Right?
And had a great conversation.
And made some s'mores on the campfire.
I don't know if a Bigfoot can have chocolate.
Are they like dogs?
Maybe. I don't know. I've never met one. If any,
I would think they'd be closer to primates. Can orangutans have chocolate?
I'd have to look it up. But I just
Great
want to
apes,
say,
gorillas?
if any Bigfoot are listening, please let me
us
know.
know.
Tell us in the comments. Send me an email. Come over. Show up at the house. Come over for dinner.
Yeah, we have a really nice fire pit. You can sit and make s'mores with us.
If you can have s'mores.
If you can have s'mores.
If not, I have an EpiPen.
Welsh told the police that Theresa wouldn't return because she'd be happier with the community of Sasquatches in the mountains than she was at home. Which, if there was a community of Sasquai in the mountains, she probably would be, for fuck's sake. This girl's home life was terrible. But since there is no real proof that these things exist, it's probably not the case. Are you Googling the plural of
Sasquatches?
Yes, I know. I had it written as Sasquatches, but now my brain is all aflutter over the plural of Bigfoot and Sasquatch. So
I could look up Bigfoot in Latin and we can use that one.
it's Yeti. Yeti are snow ones, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Skip also voluntarily added that if they did find Theresa, they wouldn't find any signs of sexual abuse. So, preemptively putting that out. If you find her.
Yes, if you find her.
You're not going to find any signs of sexual abuse. At least not from him. And he did add that addendum. That's not me, he said. At least not from him. He claimed that while Theresa was willing to have sex with him, because what 16-year-old girl's dream isn't to have sex with a meth addict 43-year-old, he would have never done that with a young girl because he didn't do things like that.
He did so. Ask his daughter.
Yeah, right? Welsh told the police he would show them where they had camped, and he led searchers to a campsite in a grove near Browns Creek. In the campsite, there was a still smoldering fire, Now, I'm going to take an aside there because in some reports, I actually read that this still smoldering fire was grave-sized. It was like 3.5 feet wide by like 8 feet long.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't find any evidence, one, that actually was a thing, but two, that like they searched through this fire pit. But it was worth noting that there are reports that this fire was suspiciously
Large and rectangular.
yeah, like casket sized.
Right.
The other thing I would like to point out here is that he led them to a campsite that had a still smoldering fire.
That's what I was going to ask.
11 days after Theresa disappeared. 11 days. And 6 days after that first officer spotted his vehicle. So if that officer had stopped and just waited by the car for Welsh to come back to the vehicle and picked him up then, maybe this story would have ended a very different way, because that was 5 days out that they spotted his vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And that fire was still smoldering 6 days later.
I'm going to have to look up after the fact how you make that happen, because I know you do not want to equate a human being to a pig. But like if you do a pig roast and you do one of the underground ones, that's going to smolder for quite some time because it's charcoaled with dirt over top of it. It doesn't need a lot of oxygenation.
I do know from some of my true crime reading from years of yore that it is extremely hard to completely cremate a human body outside of a commercial crematorium.
Yeah. No, I was more asking how long would it actually smolder?
Oh.
I can't see it going for 11 days.
I mean, this is California, Sierra Nevadas. It's very dry area. So it's not like you're going to get rain on it, but you would think, I don't know, depending on how deep it is, I guess. But yeah, I don't think it could still smolder for 6 days. I don't think he went to Dorothy's house and then went to his mom's house. I think he went back up into the mountains.
Mm-hmm. Well, he had to go visit with his friends, the Bigfoots.
Yeah. So, but it gets even sketchier though. So in the campsite, there was a still smoldering fire, blankets, a camera, a purse, a bra, a t-shirt, pictures of Theresa, and a photo of Welsh playing the guitar with the same blanket that was found near the fire pit. While examining the images, the police determined that the area where Theresa was in the pictures was not where Welsh claimed they had been. It was not the campsite that he led them to. They believed the campsite in the photographs was about 20 miles away, possibly in Ghost Canyon, and that the Browns Creek campsite was a staged location.
Okay.
So my vibe was that he went back up into the mountains and in those 6 days, like, staged this other area.
That's logical.
I guess part of it depends on how high he was when he was at Dorothy's house blathering on about Satanists. Like, was he really that high, or was he trying to gauge, like, maybe what the response was to Theresa's disappearance?
I think he came back down. Maybe he was trying to lay the framework for his alibi. It wasn't me, it was a Satanist. Let's see how that alibi goes over. Okay, That one, nobody believed me. Let's try it was Bigfoot.
The assumption was because he was an addict. That's not, a debatable fact. He was an addict. So the assumption that I was picking up in a lot of these reports was that he was just really high. He was so high. I kind of read it a different way, though. I read that it was really easy for him to allow people to assume he was high.
Mm-hmm.
And was actually kind of gauging and planning his potential defense. Police searched all three areas, Shut-Eye Peak, Browns Creek, and Ghost Canyon. with infrared helicopters looking for Theresa. They brought in search dogs, which would pick up a scent, but then lose it again quickly. The only thing police found was a blue shirt with meth in the pocket that belonged to Welsh. So he did have drugs up there. So maybe he was high. I don't know.
It's still going to be a how high, because, there's degrees of that, even in meth, and not that I've done meth, but the high in meth is not a long period of time. It's a quick interaction.
Yeah.
Maybe he got her high, did what perverts do, and then went on from there.
Maybe. The majority of people believe that Welch killed Theresa and disposed of her body in the mountains. Some, others, mostly Welch's family, believe she had been abducted by someone else. Even though his daughter, Chandra, admitted that her father was a predator, she claimed his only crime was exercising bad judgment by taking a teenage girl into the mountains. Welsh was charged with child endangerment and abduction. He was arraigned and released on bail. However, 3 days before his trial, all charges were dropped. The prosecutor was worried that an abduction trial could prohibit a murder charge in the future, citing double jeopardy. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but double jeopardy, as I know it, doesn't apply. So I don't understand. So double jeopardy would be if they charged him with murder or a murder-related charge and lost the trial, they couldn't recharge him. But it seems to me that charging him with child endangerment and abduction is a completely different charge from murder. The prosecutor, though, he did say when he dropped the charges that if they found a body or if a period of time passed and they didn't find a body, he was going to go through with those charges. But he never did. Unfortunately, Welsh never faced those or any other charges. He died March of 1998, so a full 10 years plus after Theresa disappeared at the age of 54 from coronary artery disease. Theresa Ann Bier has never been found and was never seen again.
Well, I have the reality of what you're going to have afterwards. Part of me, the still optimistic, small part of me that survives, is Theresa is living with Bigfoot.
I hope she is. I really hope she is.
Or she got smart.
It took off.
When she said she saw a Bigfoot, she hightailed it to the mountains, and she is living by herself in the woods or has a completely different name and lives somewhere else. That's the hopeful, optimistic part of me.
Yeah. There is a possibility. She was classified as slow, and in all the news reports, they kind of talked about her like she had a developmental disability. I'm not sure she did. I'm not sure, because from what I could tell, that didn't pop up until she was like in high school and living with her uncle, and it felt more of a result of what was happening in her life more than her actual brain capacity.
Yeah, you figure from starting out, she was physically abused as a child. Mm-hmm. She was starved. She was emotionally abused going into her teenage years. Probably, again, physically and sexually abused in her mid-teens. Mm-hmm. So was she slow? Doesn't matter. It's a product of the environment. She wasn't in school enough to make an impression on her teachers. They can't make that determination without enough data.
Well, my hope is that she wasn't like developmentally disabled, that she was smart and used this as an opportunity to disappear from that life and start a new one.
I hope so.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the case, but it's going to stay in the back of my mind. This one, when I read her birth date, it like made me connect in a way that I typically don't, because she's my age.
Right.
She was just a little bit older than me. And so like, I know like literally what I was doing on those dates, these dates in this timeline. I remember that time in my life. I remember what I was doing, and so I felt this connection. And she also looks like my best friend from that time as well. She's very similar in features to a girl that I spent most of my time with back then. So yeah, so this one hit a little hard, and I felt connected to her, and I was just so angry on her behalf for everything, the failures. So crime has a cause and effect. And let's talk about some of the causes, some of the background. I tried to kind of delve into the culture of the area at that time of Fresno, California, and surrounding area, and couldn't get a ton of information. There was a lot of back and forth. Some people thought it was like the greatest area ever. You wouldn't want to live anywhere else other than Fresno in the 80s. And there were other people who were like, it was a shithole. I couldn't wait to escape Fresno in the 80s. So you kind of have this dichotomy. I do know that the area, especially that area, was experiencing an uprise in crime. California at that time was going through kind of a crime wave and an increase almost yearly. So at the time in California, there were 918 violent crimes per 100,000 inhabitants. And this is in 1987. So that's a really high crime rate.
Okay.
For a state. This was a 2% increase from the prior year. I also know that there are currently over 13 unsolved missing persons cases in California for girls under the age of 18 during that time period. So that's a lot. And 13 is actually probably a low number. I was really having a hard time finding like statistics on missing persons in that area. In the 80s, most of the police forces and such haven't digitized their records from that time. So I was struggling a little bit to find some of these statistics. So
because that number, I mean, I really hate to say it, that number feels low.
That's the unsolved.
Yeah, it still feels low.
Still feels low to you?
Yeah.
There's also a drug epidemic in the area in the 80s. Also, California in general, because of the proximity to the mountains and this really kind of untamed wilderness, it is really bad terrain for finding a body. It's, wooded, it's rugged terrain, there's mountains, and I think that's when there's all these unsolved cases because they haven't been able to find bodies. It's not like someplace in the Midwest where it's all farmers' fields that kind of go down to dirt in the winter so you could fly a helicopter over and see. This is terrain that it's just nearly impassable all the time. It's heavily covered by brush and woods, so even flying overhead you can't see. And they did use infrared, but it's 80s infrared.
Even that infrared's not...
It's only going to find a
living
heat signature, yeah. And then, really the biggest cause of this is just dereliction of duty to a child. Everyone literally failed her. Every single person. It kind of sounded like the only person who actually gave a shit about this kid was her grandma, who was too old to take care of her.
Yeah.
So, but also because she had this terrible family, there was no family to actually push for results. There was no, if one of our kids were to have gone missing, we would be the police department's nightmare.
Absolutely.
We would be bothering them all the time. And there are other kids from this time who have gone missing whose families are still pushing the police to do something, reopen the case. What about, so family involvement is actually key for a lot of these cold case files. If you have nobody being like, hey, get on this, then there's no impetus to reopen it, to take a look. And that's probably why the DA never re-brought the charges, even though he promised he was going to. There was no family putting pressure on him to do it.
He probably retired.
Maybe, but the next one, like, again, if it was our kid, 2-3 years go by and there's no body, you and I are going to be like, hey, then you need to get him on kidnapping or something. You need to put him away because he's not doing this to another child. And she had nobody to advocate for her. So she had nobody to push authorities to look into it again.
I'm over here on my phone, so I'm looking up a date for Adam Walsh.
And that is on my list. So in looking at the culture of this time, we talked about the satanic panic a couple episodes ago. There was also another panic happening, and it was called the missing children panic. And this actually, I didn't know that it was actually like a labeled panic. I do remember this stuff, but I didn't know that it had been like labeled as a panic, but it has a Wikipedia entry.
Okay, I had no idea. I'm assuming you're talking about the kids on the milk cartons?
Kids on the milk carton. It was actually kicked off by the disappearance of Adam Walsh. Mm-hmm. But a few things actually kind of went into this panic, and it's part of what worked against Theresa in this case. The missing children panic centered on boys. It was the main thing was boys are going missing. And yeah, it's wild, but the prevalent thought was girls, especially teens, they run away. And that boys were at risk because of the scary, I'm going to make the spooky voice, the scary homosexuals out there taking children. I am being so sarcastic right now. I hope you understand that. So it's the 80s. It's the AIDS crisis. And it's that era of vilifying LGBT community. They were using the missing children panic not to actually protect children. They were using it to vilify people that, were other than.
I actually think, and I hope that the people who are listening can hear how hard my eyes are rolling to the back of my head right now.
That's why I was using the spooky voice. Because it's ridiculous. Like, they're using fear to motivate people to place blame on a minority group.
Does this sound familiar, people?
Right. You don't want to get political, but it's always political. So it centered on boys. This is actually despite the fact that statistics show that 69% of non-family kidnapping happened to teen girls. 69% of non-related kidnappings are perpetrated against teenage girls.
By middle-aged white men.
Most likely. I have no statistic on that, but yeah. Teenage girls are far more at risk than young boys, even young girls. But they are almost entirely, when taken to the police, classified as runaways. That just says a lot right there, doesn't it? Like, do I need to add commentary to that? Because it feels like that kind of speaks for itself.
No, there would have been a long silence right here, which I would have had to wind up editing out.
This is a predatory era as well. It's the era of the serial killer, the 70s and 80s in California. There were so many serial killers, so many.
Not just California, that whole West Coast. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is what you were saying before, in those remote wooded areas, you can't find a body. Mm-hmm. You never know.
And that's the thing. In looking at like some of the other cases of girls who went missing during that time and who are still missing, there's a lot of them that they're like, were these people also responsible for some of these other ones? So there were people who were caught and incarcerated for kidnapping, murdering teenage girls at that time. But California also, for a time in there, had the death penalty. And they're not going to, if they're serving time just in prison, even if it's a life sentence, they're not going to confess to more if it could potentially add charges and get them
more time or the death penalty
or the
what
death
have
penalty.
you.
So there's suspicion that a lot of these people who had been picked up for similar crimes in the 80s may have done more, but we'll never know because they're not going to confess to it.
Right. Or in some cases, they were executed, promising, if you don't execute me, I will tell you more of the places where I buried people in the mountains.
Right. So, yeah, when you wrap all of those things up, with a tidy little bow, and the fact that Theresa was just a nobody, like the biggest thing on that is a draw to this case and why you're still seeing it today is the whole Bigfoot hook, because this idiot claimed Bigfoot took her, which nobody believed.
Otherwise, she'd just been another forgotten teenager.
On the list that I read of unsolved cases of girls who are still missing, nobody would know who she was. Mm-hmm. And as it is, even with that, it was really, really difficult to find information on this case. And some of what I've reported here may be hearsay. I could not actually find anything like official on it to actually grab my information from. So I was reading like multiple recounts of it, trying to find the ones, that shared information or made the most sense, because a lot of them, especially with that Bigfoot aspect, they like to make things a little bit more fantastical. I don't know the word I'm looking for. They want to make it like spookier.
Fantastical is a good word there.
Fantastical. So yeah. But that also makes me so angry on her behalf too. Like she was somebody. She was somebody. And if her life was cut short, this is what it's because it's a curiosity because of the Bigfoot hook, and that fucking sucks. Like we don't know anything about her other than she lived a terrible life and it probably ended in tragedy. And that I want to know, what music did she like? Did she listen to the same stuff I did? What was her favorite color? Like, it's in all these cases, it's not about the victim, unfortunately. And that fucking sucks. So, cause and effect, though. I kind of really came up short on the effect portion of this, because it just wasn't a big enough crime. Crime has a cause and effect, and it should be a big enough crime. A 16-year-old girl disappeared forever, but nobody cared. And so it just wasn't big enough to make the splash. Other than the deep, disturbing disappointment that I am currently feeling with law enforcement and society as a whole.
Don't forget DFS.
Yeah. It didn't really do much. The one big one that I did gave me just a tiny bit of satisfaction was if you find Welsh's grave on Find a Grave, which I use that website a lot because when you see the headstones or the information taken from obituaries and death certificates, then that is a solid, that happened, that person existed, and that this is the day they died. So I use Find a Grave a lot. Somebody added a note to the official description on his Find a Grave entry. And there's a burial place for him, but like no plot number or no picture of his headstone. I think they used his mugshot picture as the Find a Grave picture. And you can see his wife's headstone, but it doesn't look like he has one anywhere near it. A lot of times you can see like the neighboring headstones in the pictures on Find a Grave, and hers, you can't see his at all. It's like a really uptight and close shot. So I don't know if he has a headstone or not, but it's not there. But somebody added a notation that says got away with murder. So at least that's his fucking legacy.
Maybe Bigfoot left it.
Somebody did leave him flowers though. Like, one of the reasons I was willing to do this story is because there are no living people close to it anymore. I don't really want to do stories where we're exploiting people who still have relatives who are hurting.
Understandable.
Right. That feels exploitive and it could icky to me. So on this one, pretty much everybody involved has passed on, including her uncle and parents. Her sister may still be alive. There was a post on Reddit that somebody who's claiming to be her sister commented on, but that's Reddit. So
it's Reddit. Yeah. Who knows?
It may be her, maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, unfortunately, not a lot of lasting effects.
Well, I don't even know where to start with the police department. I don't know where to start with DFS. I don't know where to start with how I feel about the adults who were around this girl who allowed this to happen. I would love, absolutely love, to meet the Bigfoot, to let him know that we have successfully redeemed him.
Yes.
Bigfoot had nothing to do with
It
this.
wasn't Bigfoot.
I was actually...
Or if it was, then he's like just saved her. Like, if she is happily living with a colony of Bigfoot somewhere, then they saved her from the misery she was living in.
Yeah.
Either way, he's not the villain in this story.
No, I just, as a personal aside, I was actually disappointed in this entire story on so many levels. I was actually hoping for a real Bigfoot story, and I was given instead the absolute dregs of humanity.
Yeah. When I found it and started researching it, just seeing the abducted by Bigfoot title, I was like, oh, that's going to be a good one. And it is. It's a good story, but it's not an amusing story.
No, but it does highlight the failures in the system, failures that are still going on in the system today. And I think if there is, I look for a moral in any story. There's a moral in this story. It's be nice to Bigfoot. And Bigfoot, if you're listening, please call me. Come to dinner.
Yeah. That and Theresa, if you're out there. And God, I hope you are. You might not have had anybody who cared about you in childhood, but we care about you now. Like, you're not forgotten. This is still an open case. Theresa Bier was last seen near Shut-Eye Peak in Madera County, California. At the time of her disappearance, she was approximately 5'5" and weighed 110 pounds. She has brown hair and hazel eyes, along with a surgical scar on her lower right leg. As of 2025, Theresa would be 53 years old. If you have any information about her location or disappearance, please contact Fresno Police Department at 559-621-2541. And now, I'd like to thank my sources. I'd like to thank the Charlie Project for their missing person entry on Theresa Ann Bier. I'd also like to thank Cold Case Explorations for their article, The Odd Disappearance of Theresa Bier, Was Bigfoot to Blame? I'd like to thank Strange Outdoors for their piece, The Shocking Disappearance of Theresa Ann Bier. And lastly, thanks to Medium.com for the man who blamed Bigfoot for the kidnapping of 16-year-old Theresa Bier, written by the Midnight Rider. Join us next time as we explore the origins obscura of lore.